Vladimir Putin is in India, and the way
Hmm.
that he was welcomed, it's somehow amazing to see. And he was talking about, he has mentioned that the United States is asking India to do something that they're not doing it. The United States as a country doesn't do it in terms of, buying nuclear fuel. And because the United States is buying it from Russia, but it's trying to put pressure on India not to buy it. Here is what Vladimir Putin said.
As for India's purchases or purchase of energy resources from Russia, well, I would like to note, and have already mentioned this publicly once, the United States itself still buys nuclear fuel from us for its own nuclear power plants. That is also fuel, uranium for the reactors operating in the United States. If the US has the right to buy our fuel, why shouldn't India have the same privilege? This question deserves thorough examination, and we stand ready to discuss it.
Yeah.
Touche.
Yeah. Hypocrisy. Thy name art Donald Trump.
Yes.
Larry, how do you find the way that India is resisting the pressure from the United States? Because as a part of, we know how important India is for Russia
Sure.
in
Well-
BRICS and outside BRICS.
Well, the entire premise of the U.S. effort to pressure India was based on a false assumption. It was that they assumed that India's economy was so heavily dependent on exports to the United States that, of course, we could use sanctions and further threats of more sanctions as a way to coerce India. I'm continually amazed at the stupidity of these people. I mean, people like Scott Bessent, he should know better. I didn't have to do a massive amount of research to discover that India's exports as a percentage of their GDP to the United States are about 5-10%. It would cause a little bit of damage, but not the kind of damage that would be caused if they stopped buying inexpensive oil from Russia, oil and gas, for God's sake. I mean, that would have a devastating impact on the Indian economy. The other thing, we're like the Alzheimer's generation, and not just Trump. I mean, Biden, yeah, boy, did he have it. Obama, George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, they have no sense of history and the relationships between India and Russia, which go back into the days of the Soviet Union. And in fact, within the whole context of the Cold War, it was Pakistan that was serving as a base for CIA operations into the Soviet Union. Well, the Russians haven't forgotten that, and it was India who was seen as a counterbalance to Pakistan back then. But the Russians and the Indians have always had very, very good, warm relations. And I'm just sort of amused watching some of the news coverage like, oh, God, Modi welcomed Putin. Yeah, that's like, yeah, let's applaud the fact that a dog meets another dog and sniffs his rear end. Okay? That's what dogs do. This is what India and Russia do. They're friends, for God's sake. So deal with it. The thing that's really sort of thrown a monkey wrench into this, from the U.S. standpoint, the U.S. goal was always to destroy Russia and then go after China. Well, now Russia is playing the mediator, a mediator role between China and India, and the foundations of that conflict are actually starting to crack and erode. And with Modi and Xi dealing with each other. So, Russia's playing a significant role in the creation of this new world economic order. And if anything else, this was Modi given the middle finger to Donald Trump and his attempts to bully him.
There's another element to it also, Neiman, a strategic element of primary importance, I think, the administrations I've served, all the way from H.W. Bush, have been trying very arduously to create a new nuclear relationship with India. One that the Congress wouldn't rip our rear ends off for doing, because some of them anyway, because it had implications for helping their weapons program. And I've been involved in that diplomacy. It was very fine tuned. It was carefully done. The people who were carrying it out, God save the Queen and King, were diplomats from the State Department, principally, some DOD help. But it was an arduous time trying to get the balance in there to form this new relationship with India that our domestic people would accept and that India would accept, and that wouldn't be a real danger and would be an economic boon. And even, as Larry was insinuating, a strategic boon for the United States to kind of pull India into the nuclear world that we dominated rather than the one others might dominate. We've killed that. We've destroyed it. We've murdered it in its nascent crib, as it were. I mean, it was blooming. It was blossoming. Evan Feigenbaum and Boucher and a couple of other people at State deserve great credit for having painstakingly worked for weeks on end, years on end, to get this accomplished. We've destroyed it. We've utterly destroyed it. I don't think that relationship will ever revive itself, because India, as Larry was insinuating or saying directly, has new vistas now. Vistas that are quite historic and quite old in many respects, if you know the history of Russia-India. But nonetheless, they seem to be closing doors on others now. And what we have done, as Larry also intimated, is force not just Russia and China together, two of the most powerful countries in the world now, but India as well.
Yeah.
Soon to outstrip China in population and producing engineers and others at a rate that's phenomenal. And we're making enemies of them all. This is preposterous.
But there is a way to deal with that, Larry, to have a better understanding of what's going on, I think, between Russia and India, or Russia and China. Do you feel that the Trump administration is getting there to understand, there is some sort of limitation on the pressure that you can inflict on these countries? And what would be the outcome for them, for their attitude?
Well, they're starting to understand that they don't have the leverage that they thought they did. In the past, we had this commercial in the United States, 20, 30 years ago. It was about an investment, a company that was trying to get people to, invest their money, buy stocks. It was called E.F. Hutton. And the commercial went, "When E.F. Hutton speaks, everybody listens." And you'd have a crowd of people talking, and someone would say, "E.F. Hutton," and they'd all stop and look and listen. It was the United States thought it was E.F. Hutton, and it ain't no more. Nobody's really listening to us. And the talks, what took place between Putin and Modi, they were talking political cooperation, economic cooperation, military cooperation. Just this morning, they announced, or morning my time, evening their time, that Russia's going to start producing their fifth generation fighter, Su-57, in India. And India's got the S-400 air defense system. And boy, it sure wants now the S-500. And, Russia hasn't made any immediate commitment on that. And then at the same time, Russia's building, I think it's the largest nuclear power plant in India. And they just brought already two of the reactors online now. So it's already providing power to India. So the U.S. attempt doesn't recognize that the change in the world. We're witnessing the birth of a new world economic order. It's the foundation of it resides with Russia, China, and India. Those three in particular. Brazil to a lesser extent, and South Africa. South Africa is just sort of, they're hanging on for the ride. But the real power lies in Russia, China, and India. India and China in particular, because of the size of their countries, and representing about a total of 3 billion people within the world economy. So the United States is unprepared for this, and it still thinks that it can compel people to do its will. But what we've learned over the last 3 or 4 days, the number of these countries, particularly China, they're no longer buying U.S. Treasury bills, and Scott Bessent had to come out, and the U.S. government had to buy its own Treasury bills. So the United States now economically is finding it increasingly difficult to get the world community to support our drug habit. I'll call it a drug habit. As long as they kept buying our dollars, man, we could spend because we didn't have to worry about paying it back. Now we have to worry about paying it back, and these other countries are increasingly dealing with each other economically in terms of their own currencies. So this meeting today in India, it was symbolic of the weakness of the United States in an arena where it used to be powerful.
Larry and I have coordinated ahead of time. Apparently, it must be our birthdays. That nuclear power plant that Larry just mentioned Russia's going to build was a major objective of our strategy. Westinghouse, Hitachi, Mitsubishi, lots of companies, Allied and American, were looking at that, and subsequent ones. I suspect they're all gone now.
Carl, we talk about India, Russia, and China and other countries. You see their national interest is the hardcore of what they're seeking for. But do you see that happening in the United States, or some sort of ideology is running in the United States, the whole foreign policy of the United States? Carl.
You asking me? Oh, what? Tell me the ideology other than money. What is the ideology that's driving the policy of the United States?
Sometimes the money doesn't, overlap the national interest of what you're doing.
Well, I don't see it overlapping in any significant way, except for the benefit of the Trump clan and the Trump family. That's what I see. I see they're a pack of grifters. And that's why they've just turned their back completely on Zelensky, as far as I'm concerned. That's the way these grifters operate. That's the way real estate agents operate. That property is no longer valuable. I don't need it. Get out of here. I don't want to talk about it. But when you talk about policy, the policy is, if it exists at all, is out of the royal man's mouth on a daily basis. And when you have nothing but sycophants, or would-be sycophants, in some cases, they don't know when to shut up, in other words, and they're not very smart, executing as a cabinet and as principal members of your National Security Council, that kind of policy, it looks kind of strange. And what Larry just said about the Secretary of the Treasury is absolutely right. Yesterday, it was leaked that he even mentioned in a meeting, and I have no doubt that this is accurate, we are going to have payments on our debt of $3 trillion within the next decade. We can't even begin to deal with that. So what do? Shut down? What is Trump going to do if it happens within his 4 years, maybe even earlier than the third year or the first part of the fourth year? What is this team going to do when we cannot pay the interest payments on our debt? Period. We're going to shut down in many respects. It's going to be extremely difficult on the average American. That's the real pain that's coming. And on those who are in, I would say now, not the lower 50%, but the lower 65%, who are living from paycheck to paycheck, meal to meal, apartment to apartment, and wondering where the future's going for them. If Bessent's right, and I think he is, that we're certainly courting $2 trillion, and he was intimating we might be courting $3 trillion. This is disaster.